Hello everyone and welcome to Azam Sharp Weekly, and in this video we'll be learning about how to manage loading states in SwiftUI. And by loading states I mean when you're trying to perform some sort of asynchronous request and you want to see a progress view when you're loading, or a successful data when it is loaded, or an error if something bad happens. So how can we make that kind of a scenario, and how can we accomplish it in different ways? So the first thing we need in our loading view is some sort of a time-consuming operation. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and simply create that operation over here. Now, this is a job for a HTTP client or a web service layer, but just so that I can easily distribute this code to you and not create a repository, just gist. So I'm just going to add it over here. Here we go. Time-consuming operation. It will be async. It can throw an error. And let's start with just string. It's going to return you a string. All right. Now, we're not going to be performing an actual HTTP call, but we can simulate the time that we're waiting. So let's go ahead and simulate this, that we are going to be waiting a little bit. Okay. And finally, we're going to return something. Let's say we just return Batman as a string, because we have to return string because this function, perform time-consuming operation, is supposed to be returning string. Now the question basically comes that, well, when we are performing this operation, how can we show a loading view or a progress view? And when this operation completes, how can we display Batman? Because that's the string we want to display. Now there are different ways of accomplishing or managing your loading states, but the easiest one is to just start with some sort of an enum that can represent different loading states. So I'm going to go ahead and say loading state as an enum. And in this, I'm going to create different cases. There will be a case for none, which means that, well, it's not really loading and it's not successful and it's not a failure. It's really not doing anything. It's basically idle. All right. Then we have loading, when you are actually loading. Then we have success. And right now, since we are returning Batman, and Batman is a string, which is indicated over here also, we are just going to put string over here. And don't worry about that. We are going to change it later on. And error. Maybe something bad happens and you're not able to load something. Some error has been thrown, network error. Then we're going to throw so that's the last case, which is going to be giving you the error. So having all of these things set up, we can go ahead and create a state. Private state, we'll call it loading state, and the initial value of that loading state, since we're not really doing anything right now, it's going to be none. You can call it idle also, IDLE, idle, not really doing anything, just hanging around, but none is also fine. Okay. Next up, I'm going to use a VStack because I need to add a couple of different things. The first one will be, let's say, perform time-consuming operation, which is simply a button. And let's go ahead and set the button style to be border prominent. Okay. Now, even over here, we have different ways of calling the perform time-consuming operation. I can go ahead and perform this just by calling it like this, but it's not going to work like this, right? Because this particular function, which is called the perform time consuming operation, is marked with async. And inside the button click, this context is not async. So there are a couple of ways of handling that. You can go ahead and wrap all of this stuff with task and await, and also try, because this can blow up. And when you're using try, then we'll have to use do and catch if you want to catch the error, and so on. All right. So you can use this approach over here. Now, one of the downsides of this approach can be that if you perform this operation and just walk away, meaning maybe your view just goes away, then this operation is still going to be performing. This operation will not be canceled. All right. Now, in our case, the content view is the root view. So it's not really going to go away. It's not really going to dismiss. Okay. But the other way that you can handle all of this stuff is by using the task modifier. So let me show you a different way of doing that. Now, if you have questions regarding this, or if you have comments regarding this part, please go ahead and write in the comment section that will you use this approach or will you use the task modifier approach. So I'm going to use the task modifier approach, which means that the task will disappear, will go away when the view actually goes away. All right. So inside the button click, what we're going to do is we're simply going to change the loading state. So I can simply go ahead and say loading state. And now when you click a button, we can probably just say loading. All right. And when it is loading, it's going to change the state. At that point, we can perform the task modifier. So I'm going to say task modifier based on the ID. So ID is an argument that you can pass, which is basically saying that if the loading state actually changes, then go ahead and call this action. All right. So basically it's saying that if the loading state changes, then this task modifier will be called. And one of the benefits of using the task modifier is when the view actually goes away, then the task modifier will automatically be canceled. And this task modifier is actually on the VStack. So if the VStack goes away, then whatever is being done in the task modifier will be canceled. How will the VStack go away? Well, VStack is part of the body. So we need to see when the content view goes away. So maybe if we were using some sort of a modal or we were doing some sort of navigation and we go back and forth, in those cases it will be helpful. But right now it's not even working. I mean, it's saying that the loading state, you can see the error over here, requires that loading state conforms to equatable. And as of right now, you can see that the loading state is not conforming to equatable. So we need to find a way to fix that. So how can we make sure that the loading state is conforming to equatable? So let's go back up to the loading state, and we can say over here the loading state enum will be conforming to equatable. But that is not enough. Just by saying that equatable protocol, we actually have to go ahead and also conform to equatable. So over here you can see that we're just using the loading state and we are just trying to conform to equatable. All right, let's go back now. The error actually over here goes away, which is great. And now we can start using our task modifier. So if the loading state is equals to loading, then it means that we need to perform the time-consuming operation. And since we are inside the task modifier, we are already in the async context, we can simply call try await and obviously wrap all of this stuff with do catch and all that if we want to, get all the errors. And whatever the result that this is going to return us, we can assign somewhere. So let's go ahead and say we assign it to movie name. Okay, we haven't really used movie name for anything, but we have at least assigned it. If there's an error in the catch, we can go ahead and use loading state and catch the error and pass it to the error part. If there's a success, then loading state equals to success, and we can simply pass in the movie name. Great. And that's pretty much it. But if you go ahead and run the application right now, it's not really going to display anything, meaning it's not going to display the progress view. It's not going to display, the actual movie name being printed on the screen, because we still haven't figured out how to display or what to display. So let's go back to our button and perform a switch on the loading state. So inside our VStack, we are performing a switch right after the button. Now, it can be before the button, depending on where you want to put that particular control or a view that will be displayed. For none, we are not really going to display anything. So we're just going to say empty view. For loading, we're going to go ahead and say progress view, because this is what we want to display when you are actually loading. For success, it's up to you, whatever you want to display, but let's go ahead and change this to, let's say, movie name, and we can use the text control to display movie name. And what about the error? How do you want to display the error? Now, you can use your custom controls over here also, but I'm just going to go ahead and use text view. And this will be a little bit different text view because we should be able to use, let's say, a foreground style and red. So error will be a little bit different. After making these changes, let's go ahead and click on Perform Time-Consuming Operation. And now you can see that it performs a time-consuming operation and it displays Batman. What about if there was an error? Well, let's go ahead and create an error. So I'm just going to go ahead and quickly create an enum to represent an error. It's right here. And let's go ahead and throw the error. So throw network error dot operation failed. All right. So now it means that whenever you're going to try to call perform time consuming operation, it's immediately going to just throw the error. It's not even going to go to these lines. Let's go ahead and click on perform time consuming operation. Okay, so maybe we shouldn't be doing this part. The error should be called after 2 seconds probably, right? There we go. Just to give it a little bit more realistic output. There we go. So operation couldn't be completed. Great. So this is also working. Now, one of the things that you may have already seen is the success. When you're passing the data over here, it's tied up to a string. This means that our response will always be string. Now, this is not something that, that we want. We want the response to be anything. I mean, it can be any type. So we have to make sure that this is, well, generic. So let's go ahead and in the next section, make sure that we are converting this string, not this string, sorry, but the loading state string, this one, to act on as a generic type. But before we do that, let's go ahead and thank our sponsors. This video is brought to you by RocketSim. Supercharge your Xcode simulators. RocketSim is an application that allows your Xcode simulator with additional and a lot of functionality. Check out their website at rocketsim.app. You can have functionality as comparing designs side by side, grids, and rulers. But my favorite one is user default editor. I mean, how cool is this? If you put something in user defaults, you can actually use RocketSim to view it, and not only to view it, but also change it. I mean, I use user defaults all the time, and this alone feature is the best available. All right, let's check out other things. Quick actions. You can set up your locations with RocketSim. A lot of stuff. A lot of things that are missing in Xcode Simulator. All of that stuff you can achieve and you can get by getting RocketSim. So go ahead and visit rocketsim.app for more information. Thank you so much. Welcome back. So let's go ahead and work on making sure that we are not only using string as a type over here, but this can be any generic type. So in order to do that, I will have to go to our loading state, and I'll say T type, and T will be codable, and it also will be equatable. So we're only dealing with T as a generic type that is both codable and equatable. Now we can start using T, which is any type that is codable and equatable over here. We're also going to update this state comparison. We're going to just pass in T as a type. Great. Let's go ahead and build it. Now let's go back to our content view. Now in the content view, we can see that this is complaining because now we have to provide the type that we are working on with. So right now it just says loading state, and if you're working with string, then you can simply go ahead and pass in string, and that's going to make it happy. Because now we are telling it that, well, the generic type will be string. That's the type we're going to be using. But you're not only confined to string. I mean, I can go ahead and create any type I want. Let's go ahead and create a movie type. So let's go on the top, and we'll create a type called movie. You can see the movie is codable and equatable. And now I can just say, oh, well, that's going to be a movie. So this means that when you're loading it, you are going to get as a success response, and that response will contain a type that will be movie. All right. So over here in the success, we will need to update, and we'll have to say, well, we're not getting a movie name anymore. We're going to get the movie object. And in that movie object, yes, we may have a title. And that is something we can use. The perform time-consuming operation needs to be updated. So now we're going to just go ahead and say movie. And instead of just returning Batman over here, we're going to return a movie with the title, let's say Batman. All right. And we should probably not call it movie name, right? So we should call it movie and pass in the movie. So now it should work with any generic type as long as that type is codable and equatable. Let's go ahead and try to see. Okay. It's pretty much working just like before. Nothing really has changed. The only thing that we are allowed us to do is that now we can work with generic types instead of always working with string, which is great. Now, as of right now, this looks pretty good, right? But maybe we can move all of this stuff somewhere else. And by somewhere else, I mean, maybe we can create some sort of a wrapper which can contain all of that information. So I'll show you one way to create a wrapper view on top of this. But in the end, it will be depending on the project that you're working with and how frequently you are doing this. If you're doing this only a couple of times, like maybe you have only a couple of pages where it actually loads and you want to display a progress view, then this is a perfectly fine technique to do it. But if you are doing this again and again, then probably you want to create some sort of a wrapper that can wrap all of this stuff and give you a little bit more control. So let's go ahead and see how we can create that wrapper, even though you may end up not using it. But still you'll have a way to find out that what the wrapper actually looks like. A wrapper will simply be a view. So I'm just going to call it loading wrapper view. And this is where it gets a little bit complicated because we do have to pass in the type. That's the same type like a movie, but it will be a codable and it will be equatable. All right. We will have to pass in the content. So this wrapper is wrapping what? What kind of control? So in our case, it will be a button control. So that's it's wrapping onto. Then we will have to also provide loading content. This, in our case, will be just the progress view itself. And the success content. So this will be, a text view or a movie list view. And a failure content, which will be a view like a error view or a text view with a style red. And this is a view. Okay. So you can already see that it's pretty like we're passing it in a lot of generic stuff over here. All right, and since this is a view, we do need to implement the view body. And right now I'm just going to say loading wrapper view. Okay. Now, inside the wrapper view, we are going to create a couple of different properties and closures that is going to allow you to return the view. So when they are called, they will return view. So let's go ahead and I'm just going to copy it over here. The first one is the loading state. That's pretty self-explanatory. We are just using a loading state over here based on the generic type, which in our case can be movie, string, or any other type that you create. Then we have the content. This is the content that will be displayed. And this is the wrapper view will be wrapping this content. So in our case, it might be a button. Then we have the loading content. This will be a progress view. So the loading content will eventually return you a progress view. And keeping in mind that loading content is actually a view over here. All right, all of these are views. Loading content, success content, failure content, all of them are views. Next up, we need to initialize all of this stuff. And this is where it gets a little bit ugly. So instead of typing that long piece of code, I'm just going to go ahead and paste it. And you can see that we're not really doing anything complicated. It just a little bit, looks weird, because our initializer now takes in the loading state, the content, the loading content, the success content, and the failure content. So basically, it's just an initializer that is initializing all of these properties. Now, once we go inside our body, we can say views stack or vstack. And I can go ahead and display the content over here. So if I call this content closure, this is going to return me a content, and you can see that the content is of type view. And for our case, whatever content you want to display, so it might be just a button. The next up will be the actual loading state. So we're going to go ahead and say loading state. For none, we're just going to return empty view. We're not going to return anything. For loading, well, whatever you pass in the loading content, we're just going to display that. So instead of hard coding it to the progress view, we are going to give the opportunity to the caller to pass in the loading content or the loading view. For success, again, success content. So whatever the success content you have passed, we're just going to go ahead and do that. And not T, let's call it value. We're just going to go ahead and pass you the value so you can do something with it. Same with the failure content. We're just going to say failure content and pass in the error. All right. Now let's go ahead and see how we can use it. Before I use it, what I want to do is just disable this part. Not that that part is wrong or anything, but I want to just disable this because we're going to do the same thing, but with our loading wrapper view. So let's go ahead and call loading wrapper view. And you can already see it takes in so many different things. So, all right. So loading state, the content that you want to display, the actual content that is visible on the screen. Well, that will be a button, I think, right? So let's go ahead and say button, perform loading operation. And over here, we can go ahead and change the loading state to loading. Loading content. Next, we go to the loading content. This is where we will actually display the progress view. So let's go ahead and use a progress view or any kind of a view that you want. So this is up to you. And we're going to say loading. Success content. We are going to get a movie over here. And we can display the movie title. So movie.title. And then finally, we'll get the error. Again, you can use any kind of a control to display the error. I'm just going to use a text view, but again, it's completely up to you, whatever you want to use. And the button, I think I should style this a little bit differently just to have a border. Okay, so there you go. It's the same exact thing, but now it's a little bit more, well, self-contained. And if you want to use this loading wrapper view in other pages, you can. If I go ahead and click on it, You can see it pretty much works just like before. All right, but now it's a little bit more self-contained. So whether you use this approach or you use the loading wrapper view, it really depends on the situation and your project. All right, so there you have it. We have now created we have learned how to manage the loading status in our SwiftUI. So whenever we are performing some long-running task, long-running operation, we can show a progress view and a successful view and an error view and the content view and all of that. And we learn it in several different ways. Hey, if you like this video and want to support my channel, then check out my brand new website, azamsharp.school. Yeah, it's azamsharp.school. And you can find a lot of different courses on this website. So if I scroll down over here, you can see it's a beautiful website. It does offer you with the subscription plan of monthly plan for $25, annual plan right now for $249. And if you look over here, this will go up to like 19, but this number of courses just keeps on growing, and 100 plus hours of content. But let me show you the courses. That's the main thing, right? So here you go. This is all the courses. These are all the courses you are going to get with the membership. I mean, this is kind of crazy. MV design pattern, test-driven development, Swift data bootcamp, MV pattern, full stack iOS development. I mean, the list just goes on and on. And not only all these current courses that you're going to get with the membership, but all the future courses that I'm going to be building, you're going to get all of them with just a monthly membership. So check out azamsharp.school. Check out all of these amazing courses. There are some free courses over here. If you want, you can take free courses and then validate that if you like it or not. But I'm 100% sure you're going to like it. And while you're there, go ahead and subscribe to the newsletter, because every week I send out a short, really short, thought-provoking article. So you don't want to miss that. All right. Thank you so much.